Hello, today we are doing the sauna machine from Hack the Box. It's an Active Directory box and it's both recommended in the TJNull and LainKusanagi list to prepare for the OSCP. So let's get started. As always, we start with a port scan and I'm using auto recon and I also enable recursive directory scanning. Since the port scanning takes some time, I already prepared this. And we can start a Python HTTP server. And we can browse the results in our web browser. So we found many open ports. We found port 88 for Kerberos. We can have a look at SMB. We can see here the domain name and also the computer name. So let's add both to our hosts file. We can also check if we found anything for SMB, but no shares listed. The same here. And also nothing here. We see there is a web server running. And we found a few endpoints. So let's have a look at this. So on the first side, it looks like a simple static page. This section might be interesting because it can have potential usernames. And we can use this tool to generate a username list. We can clone it. We copy these usernames. And we use the tool that we just downloaded. And we just need to provide our input file and we specify where we want to store the output. So we can see here the file and we can have a look. And here we see all the potential usernames that have been generated. And whenever we deal with Active Directory, it's helpful to use this mind map. And we are right now at the beginning and we don't have any credentials. We have a few potential usernames, so we can go to the next step. And we can perform a password spray attack. So we can first check if we have a user which uses its username as a password. And we can use this command to do this. We use netexec with the SMB protocol. We specify the IP. For the users, we give it the users list. The same for the password. We use the no brute force flag, and we also want to continue on success. So let's run this. But we didn't find any valid credentials. So we can go back to our mind map. And what we also can do is some ASRep roasting. And we can use this command to do this. So let's try this as well. We use the impacket version. We define the domain name. We give it the domain controller IP, the users file, and we want to store the output for John. And this is the name of our output file. And we see we found a hash for the user F. Smith, and we can now try to crack it. We use John and we use the RockU word list. And we crack the hash, and we have now our first valid credential pair. And we can use netexec again to check if we can see all our domain users. And we can see we found a few users. We can also check if our current user has WinRM access, and we use evil WinRM to connect to the machine. And it worked. And we have access to our first flag, the user flag. We can check the permissions. But on the first side, we don't have any interesting groups or privileges. So next we can perform some automated enumeration. And we are using WinPiece. So first we need to transfer the binary and we can run it. Okay, the scan is done and it took a while, but now we can have a look at the results. So let's start at the top. We see some information about environment variables, but nothing super interesting here. Labs is not installed. We don't have any PowerShell history file. We see some information about local users. And we found some auto logon credentials for this user with this password. So let's check if we can log in with this user. We are trying WinRM again with this user and this password. Okay, we get an error message back, so it's not working. But if we look closer at this information here, we can see that this user could be this one. So we can also try this username with the same password. And it's working. We can also check the permissions for this user. And again, on the first side, no interesting groups or privileges. We also don't see any interesting files here. So at this point, it's also helpful to run Bloodhound. And I'm using the community edition. We give it the domain name, a username, the IP address and the password, and we want to collect all information. We start Bloodhound. We can visit it. And we upload our files. We can search for our first user. So this user doesn't have any outbound object control. Then let's also check the other user. So we see this user has DC sync permission. And if we check here, it tells us we can perform a DC sync attack. So this permission is used when you have multiple domain controller. They need to synchronize the data. So the data is the users and their passwords. So if one user account is created on one domain controller, it also needs to be stored in the other domain controller. And they use this permission to sync each other. And since we have now this permission as a user, we can basically pretend that we are a domain controller. And we tell this domain controller, please give us all the data you have. And we can use this data then to perform our shenanigans. We can click here to see how to perform this attack. So we just need to use secrets dump. So let's try this. So secrets dump also belongs to Impacket. We need to specify the domain, our user with the password and the domain controller IP. And here we get all the data back. And we can copy now this hash and log in with evalwinrm as administrator. And we have access. And we see the root flag. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you next time.